Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War, Warhammer 2, Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are on the map Red Desert, playing a bit of Chaos against Lizardmen. And so both armies in this game are actually very small. I only have 354 troops and my enemy has not even 700, 657. And so we're both going pretty small and elite as far as our forces go. And I decided to go for a very monster heavy build this time around. And not only the Shaggoths, but also bringing Chaos Armored Trolls, who are one of those units you really don't see very often, but I really wanted to give them a shot, and I do believe that against Lizardmen they could potentially be somewhat useful. So for my lord, I did bring Kolek, and I think Kolek is actually, if you want to contest Lizardmen, like in a straight up contest their lords, Kolek is not a bad choice. He has very high weapon strength, he has a bonus against large, he has all-around solid melee stats, good armor, which and missile resistance, so you can just shrug off enemy fire. He does stuff stand your ground. He has Star Crusher, which gives him a huge damage boost, and he has a Lord of the Storm, which is a nice little bombardment spell that can really kind of help break up mobs. Plus, he does cause fear, terror, and he's actually very quick on his feet at 78 speed, so he's definitely just an all-around powerful Lord. Definitely fairly comparable to, say, Krokgar on Grimlock, though perhaps a little bit weaker as long as Krokgar is mounted, or has Frenzy going. Alongside him, I did bring two Dragon Ogre Shaggoths. I did not bring any heroes in this build. The Dragon Ogre Shaggoths are basically mini Koleks. Their stats are somewhat lower. Their armor's a little bit lower. Their HP pool's a little tiny, literally 1 point lower. Basically, they're just mini Koleks without the sort of Lord buffs and attachments. But they're very powerful. My hope is that I can kind of goon enemy lords and large monsters. And if my opponent does bring a lot of infantry, I'll be able to flank them and tear bomb them. And one of the important things to keep in mind when playing against Lizardmen is that actually all Lizardmen infantry, including Temple Guard, are susceptible to fear and terror. None of them have psychological immunity, which might seem a little weird given that they're a bunch of big lizards and you'd kind of expect them to be fearless, but they aren't. They don't have a lot of psychological immunity, much like Chaos Warriors for that matter. For my front line, it has 3 units of Chaos Warriors with halberds. This is one of the good strategies with Chaos Warriors with halberds, is that they or just provide a well-rounded sort of, they have good melee defense, decent enough melee attack, good armor, decent weapon strength that's armor piercing and anti-large. And you can kind of use them as a unit that surrounds your large units, as a bodyguard sort of unit. So if Kolek needs to run away, if some of my Shaggoths need to run away, these guys can kind of dilute the attacks, surround the enemy, block them off, and they can also dilute the damage the trolls are taking, which will hopefully help keep them in the fight a little longer. Now, I did bring a unit of Aspiring Champions for that leadership bonus, because of course Kolek is going to be doing his own thing, running around. And you can see that with the leadership bonus from the Aspiring Champions, secure flanks, all that sort of stuff, and 3 chevrons put into them, the Chaos Trolls actually have over 56 leadership. They did get a slight buff in Mortal Empires. I do believe they went up 38 to 40 leadership. And with these sorts of buffs, they're actually able to get into a respectable area of leadership. So hopefully, as long as they don't get terror bombed, these guys should be able to stick around and definitely lay the smackdown. And in the back line here, I do have a unit of Chaos Marauders with great weapons. These guys, I think, are pretty decent. They call armor piercing. Oh, they're just a very powerful unit for how cheap they are. They obviously don't have much armor, but they can definitely dish out a lot of hurt. You might be wondering why I bring the Chaos Trolls. The Chaos Trolls, with 110 armor, can basically shrug off any shooting my opponent brings. They have regen. Lizardmen don't really have fire damage, with the exception of Fire Leech Bolas, which are not particularly good against monstrous units like this. And these guys actually have decent stats at 36 melee attack, 37 melee defense with the chevrons, of course. They hit like trucks with 100 armor piercing damage, and just overall tanky. And with that 56 leadership, thanks to these Aspiring Champions nearby, and the fact that these guys cause fear, they're going to be resistant to basically everything my opponent could throw at me. Even the Saurus Spears, who don't have armor piercing. So I was definitely gambling a little bit that my opponent wouldn't bring Temple Guard, but if he did, he'd have a thinner front line. So what my opponent did bring is 3 units of Chameleon Skinks, who are actually somewhere veteran up a decent amount. Chameleon Skinks, of course, very powerful unit, very cost efficient. They cause poison damage. They have decent missile strength, decent missile damage. They have good ammunition count. Just very short range, and but that's really basically it for their disadvantages. They don't have armor piercing, obviously, and their range is short, but that's about it. And otherwise, they're a pretty potent unit. They have stock, all that sort of stuff, all the bells and whistles. So pretty powerful unit. Definitely got to watch out for them. Even against armored units, they can do some damage, and you'll shortly see. You can see my poor Dragon Ogre Shaggoths are actually getting picked at, losing a couple hundred HP here to the volleys from the Skinks. My opponent's Lord is Krokgar. Krokgar, of course, is very powerful. There's not much to say for him. He's mobile. He hits like a truck. He has huge charge bonus. He has Frenzy. He can disrupt with Swiftness of Eitzel, Deadly Onslaught. He's just good all around. And of course, he does have a charge of Cold-Blooded to self-heal. And of course, causing fear, terror, and chaos is not bad. For alongside that, my opponent did bring a Skink Priest of Beasts on a Pterodon. Interestingly enough, he did bring him with a whole bunch of spells. Actually, all of his spells. And I think Lord of Beasts is a bit of an interesting pick against Chaos, because Chaos Chaos has a lot of armor, and most of the spells in Lore of Beasts are not very good against armor. Flock of Doom is not very good against armored targets, and the rest of it is basically debuffs. The Amber Spear's okay against blobbed up armored units, but not that great, honestly. So I definitely think it's a bit of an interesting pick here, but definitely this King Priest could do some damage, and he could summon Manticores, that sort of stuff, so he could definitely make himself a bit of a nuisance. Alongside that, my opponent did bring a Feral Stegodon, veteraned up to Veterancy 9, which is a bit interesting. Probably trying to go for that leadership so it sticks around a little longer, but its stats are fairly low, but it does have a bonus against infantry, so it can definitely cause damage that way. It causes Fear and Terror, and Rampage isn't as crucial or big of a problem against Chaos, because Chaos troops, because Chaos troops don't have, or Chaos doesn't really have shooting. If your unit's Rampage, it doesn't really matter. They're going to stay in the fight against something. And usually against Chaos it's going to be a lot of infantry, so it's not a bad choice. Just that the armor's not really going to help it very much against the mob of armor piercing everybody. Finally, for his front line, my opponent did bring just a bunch of Saurus Warriors and Saurus Spears. And these guys are with shields, which does buff their melee defense a little bit. And of course give them some missile resistance, but that's not significant here. But these guys could definitely lay a bit of a smackdown on my poor halberds, and just because through sheer weight of numbers. So I'm definitely hoping to kind of catch them out on the flank here, and circling around with Kolek, trying to get in on Grimlock and Krakar. So you can see I'm throwing my halberds into the fray, trying to get my Chaos Trolls in there. You can see the Chaos Trolls are already laying the smackdown on these guys. You can see a Flock of Doom on this flank over here doing some damage. Chaos Marauders with Grey Weapons are in there doing some work. And now Kolek and his company of nasty Dragon Ogres are charging into the back here. We are dropping a Stormcaller down here in the center of the enemy blob, and you can see it nukes down these poor Saurus Warriors, drops their HP a whole bunch, and my opponent did summon a Manticore, unfortunately right on top of the Dragon Ogre Shaggoths. And the Manticore has pitiful melee stats, it rampages, and it immediately gets crushed under the Shaggoths' hammers. Over here, these Saurus Warriors are being terror routed. You can see I'm pushing some halberds through to catch these Saurus Spears so that they can't interfere with the Shaggoths. My opponent does try to get Krakar in here to disrupt the Chaos Warriors with halberds, and he does succeed in that. But basically, this block of Saurus Warriors has been completely shattered. Back here, Saurus Spears are engaging with the Chaos Warriors with halberds. It is important to keep in mind that while not armor piercing, Saurus Spears do have decent, if not amazing, armor piercing, so they can actually still dish out some hurt to a unit like Chaos Warriors. In the meantime, Kolek and his Shaggoth gang are trying to get on top of Krakar, who is being buffed with Deadly Onslaught and Swiftness of Eatsel right now. He could actually escape, but my opponent does decide to stick around, pops a cast of Flock of Doom, and you can see it's definitely a bit of a grim fight. Of course, my opponent can debuff potentially Kolek and with poison. Kolek's melee attack is better than Krakar's as long as Krakar is being afflicted by a cold-blooded, which he popped to try to keep himself alive. My opponent dropped Wiston's Wild Form on him. Not the best idea, I think, because while it does buff his damage, Krakar does not have well, it's not in my opinion the best idea because the armor is basically irrelevant against Kolek and the Shaggoths. You can see, unfortunately, some of my targeting is getting distracted, and Kolek does turn away from beating on Krakar. And my opponent is actually dishing out a lot of hurt to Kolek, and you see Kolek's morale is kind of dropping. Krakar is able to land a few connecting hits, definitely getting decent value here. And in the meantime, Chaos Warriors with halberds trying to get in there. You can see the Feral Stegodon is also beating up on Kolek. My opponent is definitely trying to snipe Kolek down over here. My Trolls have actually been terrified off. That is one of the biggest problems with them. Not so much their morale. Their morale is okay, but they're still susceptible to terror. And unfortunately, you can see Kolek gets routed. Now, I'm not able to pursue Krakar. He's too fast for the Shaggoths, but Kolek, despite still being at 2200 HP, a third of his HP pool, he's actually going to be routed off the field and chased off by the King Priest of Beasts. So definitely a good play for my opponent, getting maximum value out of what is otherwise a pretty pitiful unit. Chasing off Kolek, who could still make a huge impact. So definitely that's a bit of a problem. So despite the fact that the bar right now seems to be slightly in my favor, once Kolek's chased off the field, of course Krakar will come back. Once Kolek is gone, I'm going to be leaderless, and my morale is going to tank. Fortunately, though, my opponent's infantry corps has basically been crushed. You can see the Trolls are just laying the smackdown on these Saurus Spears with the help of the Warriors with halberds. You can see most of the infantry has been routed off and broken. Trolls are actually not too slow. They have 42 speed, but that's, I do believe, poisoned. They actually have 54 speed normally. They're going to be able to chase down Saurus Warriors easily and kill them off. This poor Feral Stegodon has been caught by the two angry Dragon Ogre Shaggoths and is being beaten down with all due haste. You can see it's already dropped down to under 2,000, and shortly thereafter it's going to be beaten to death. Krakar, though, does pop all of his abilities, dives in against the Shaggoth, and is causing some hurt. In the meantime, the Trolls are going in, and the Trolls are definitely not bad against armor. As long as they don't get terror out of these guys, do hit for 100 with poison. They're only hitting for 80, but still respectable. You can see Krakar here just getting beaten down once again, dropping under 1,000, dropping to 751, and he's going to rout off before he can get very much done. Though once again, I'm not able to pursue him. I'm not quite able to block him. He has too much mass, and he's going to be able to escape once again. The Shaggoths are not able able to connect with one more blow, unfortunately, and Krokar escapes. In the meantime, my opponent's infantry is starting to slug it out with some of my other troops. You can see over here, Chaos Trolls with armor are slugging out with the Star Spears. The Star Spears are depleted, but they are anti-large, and the Trolls don't have the best of melee stats against spear units, so it's going to take them a while to chew through them. Unfortunately, these guys do have regen, so that'll help them stick around, and of course, hopefully they do have the decent morale. Over here in the center, Krokar has routed. You can see the Chameleon Skinks are falling back to escort him, but these Chameleon Skinks are almost out of ammo. I still have a lot of high armor units, so I'm kind of not worried about the Chameleon Skinks. I'm mostly worried about what the potential damage with Krokar, and then, of course, the Skink Priest, which is out there somewhere, finally finished chasing off poor Kolek, and it will shortly be coming back. So definitely a bit of an unfortunate series of events for me. Kolek never came back, and so now I'm leaderless. And that is definitely a bit of a problem. You can see the Shaggoth is actually really high on HP in spite of everything, which is sitting at 79, instead of his Lord recently fled, which definitely shows just how powerful he can be. I've obviously still got that encouragement from the Aspiring Champions, and so at this point I'm just trying to get the Chameleon Skinks to deplete their ammo, shooting at the Shaggoths, close the distance on him, and beat the snot out of him. Krokar over here, sitting at 422 HP, should be easy pickings. You can see over here I'm finally starting to rout off the Star Spears, and I'm trying to keep the Trolls on him, because if the Trolls can chase him down, these guys will shatter, and my opponent will be left with very little on the ground. Once the Chameleon Skinks run out of ammo, they're actually not able to slow and kite the Trolls, so the Trolls will actually be able to catch them. You can see the Trolls on the charge. One of the big problems is that Star Spears with shields won't brace once they're rampaging, so they'll just charge in, and that means I get my full charge bonus in with the Trolls, which is a decent 24, and they are getting diced up incredibly quickly. Over here, Krokar has been smacked down by the angry Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. You can see one of the units of Chameleon Skinks is out of ammo, which only leaves this unit. But with the Amber Spear and the continued hail of poison darts, this Shaggoth over here is also going to be routed. However, that still does leave a Dragon Ogre Shaggoth at 3,000 HP, which is more than respectable, and my opponent really doesn't have much to hit it with. Flock of Doom is not going to do good damage to the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. You can see it's doing pitiful damage, and the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth is laying to smack down these poor Chameleon Skinks, even as the rest of my army converges on them. Obviously, I finally managed to kind of shatter these units. I wanted to make sure they would get routed for good, and I'm trying to chase down these Chameleon Skinks, all that sort of stuff, get these Chaos Armored Trolls in the fight. Over here, the Skink Priest is diving down, but one of the problems is that, unlike, for example, the Grey Eagle for the Elves, the Skink Priest on the Pterodon has absolutely pitiful melee stats. It's one of the reasons why I think Pterodons in general are one of the worst units in the game. They have no functional melee attack. Now, it's not so true for the Lords. For the Lords, it's a good mobile mount, but the low melee stats definitely showed here. And in the end, it is a Pyrrhic victory for me. I do believe it was a little more favorable in some ways than the game stats showed. One of the core problems I suffered that game was the fact that Kolek got chased off. He routed at 2,000 HP, which is roughly a third of his HP pool. So that's definitely crazy. You usually don't see Lords, especially not Lords like Kolek, route that easily, but he routed at... despite having support nearby, he had the Dragon Ogre Shaggoths right there with him. He had the Chaos Warriors with halberds right nearby, and despite that, Kolek routed. And that was a big problem. That was definitely one of the things that made me a bit nervous that game. And could have potentially cost me. I was about 2 seconds off from casting Stand Your Ground, which would have allowed me to keep Kolek in the fight and recover there, but it didn't happen. But that's okay. For my other units, I think the mix of halberds, Aspiring Champions, and Trolls actually performed in a very, very admirable manner. Of course, the kill counts were not going to be high in this game. The simple fact is both armies were tiny, both armies were rather elite, so nobody was going to be raking in hundreds of kills. But despite that, the Trolls racked up 75, which against an army composed of Saurus Warriors is not bad at all. These Trolls racked in 51. Chaos Warriors, Halberds, an okay amount. Aspiring Champions. The Chaos Marauders actually did really well as well, which surprised me a little bit because Saurus Warriors do trade pretty well with Chaos Marauders, because Chaos Marauders have terrible armor and pretty pitiful melee defense. So they die in droves usually, the Saurus Warriors, but they did manage to shot a decent amount of hurt. Of course, the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth gets kind of carried after Kolek routed off like a coward, and so definitely that was great. But definitely Chaos Trolls against Lizardmen are not the worst of picks. They have decent mass, so if you need to stop rampaging large units, they can do a decent job of that. They have 110 armor, which is pretty crazy. They have regen, they can be buffed. You obviously want to bring Aspiring Champions or something to buff their leadership, invest chevrons in them. I might have been better off investing even more chevrons in the Trolls just to get their stats up and leadership up even higher. They obviously did get terra-outed by Krokar and the Stegodon at one point, but otherwise they can be buffed to a respectable amount on leadership, and after that they're actually a well-rounded melee unit. For example, they're actually better, I do believe, than Kroxigors in stats. They have better armor. I do believe they have the same speed. They hit harder, I do believe. I think Croc score's only at 84. So basically, they're just better. In most ways, honestly, trolls are better Croxigors. The biggest problem is that leadership, and if you can make that get over that leadership, they're a decent unit. Against a faction that obviously it won't work against a faction that shoots, but that has good shooting. But against a faction like Lizards who don't have great shooting, it's decent. My opponent got a surprising amount of kills out of the Chameleon Skinks. On at least these guys, they got 27. The Stegodon, I think, definitely didn't work out. In my opinion, feral units aren't necessarily bad against chaos. Just like feral units aren't necessarily bad against vampires. Factions that don't have a lot of shooting struggle a bit against these sorts of troops, because the rampage doesn't really act as that much of a negative. But with my mob of Shaggoths there and the trolls, it was in for a very rough match. Krokar similarly had a pretty atrocious game just because he got mobbed initially by Kolek and the 2 Dragon Ogres, and later on, basically the same happened, though by then Kolek had routed off. The Skink Priest of Beast, I think, is not necessarily a bad pick, but I think my opponent would have been better off bringing a Skink Priest of Heavens with Wind Blast. And I definitely think the Manticore was a bad choice. It's 16 wins of magic. Skink Priests don't have any way of regaining wins quickly. They don't have a Power Stone or anything like that, much less Arcane Conduit. And the Manticore died in the space of like 10 seconds to Kolek and his Goon Squad. So that was definitely a bit of a rough summon. Star Warriors, I think, are decent. There's not much commentary I can make there. I think they definitely did an okay job just holding up the Chaos Warriors with halberds. As far as investment goes into his front line, I think my opponent invested definitely 2,400, so 4,800 into his front line. So he invested probably a comparable amount to what I did. Probably actually a little bit less. So he had a cheaper front line, and the front line held reasonably well, especially except for when I got terror-outed by the Angry Dragon Ogres and Kolek. But other than that, it held pretty well. And definitely inflicted some pretty serious damage. Regardless, I definitely had a lot of fun here. Good game to Junin. It was a great match. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you found it entertaining. We're getting to see good old trolls in action. If you liked it, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions, or anything like that, be sure to post it down in the comments, and I will respond as soon as I can. If you have any comments, criticism, any questions, post in the comments. I suppose that's it. I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.